and has authority over Satan and every being that would align themselves with him. It says in verse 1 and 2, it says, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. What do we make of that in 21st century Britain, in our scientific world? A man with an impure spirit came to meet him. I reckon if you read this passage in rural Tanzania or rural India, they would have a very different understanding and a very different approach to that little phrase. I guess there's lots about this sort of thing that we don't understand. David Kitley spoke a few weeks ago from a passage in Mark chapter 3, which is similar in some ways to this. And if you didn't hear him speak, I encourage you to find it on YouTube. It was just really helpful. He said a little bit about this type of thing, about this word, this impure spirit. So I do encourage you to find it. But I guess the truth is that even if there's lots that we don't understand, what we do understand from the words of Jesus, the experience of Jesus, the things that Jesus teaches, and from the Bible itself as a whole, we understand that there is a physical world in which we live, but alongside that there is a spiritual realm. And that there are spiritual beings. And some of those spiritual beings align themselves with God and his kingdom and his purposes. But we also see that there are spiritual beings that align themselves against God, against his kingdom. And the prince of those beings is the one that the Bible calls the devil or Satan. But alongside him there are others, other beings, other personal forces of evil that align themselves with him and stand against the things of God. David quoted this in his talk, but it's worth hearing again because I think it's just really helpful. C.S. Lewis said this at the beginning of his book, The Screwtape Letters. He said, there are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about the devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence. The other is to believe and to feel an excessive and unhealthy interest in them. They themselves, the devils, are equally pleased by both errors and hail a materialist or a magician with the same delight. In other words, we can be prone to sort of either just discount them or disbelieve them, believe that somehow we've explained these types of things away, or we can find ourselves drawn into an unhealthy fascination with them. And of course, Jesus found a middle ground, and that's where we want to be. Jesus recognized that they existed. He believed in their existence. But of course, he did not have an unhealthy fascination with them. But instead, when he encountered them, he took authority over them and cast them out. And I guess as Jesus' followers, that is where we want to be. What is really evident in this story is that this impure spirit has every intention to ruin and to destroy the image of God within this man and everything that is potentially good about his life. This is what it says about him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. We don't know anything really about his backstory, but we see the firm intention of this spirit that's got hold of him to ruin everything about his life. In John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus says this. He says, the thief, meaning the devil, comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. We see that graphically shown in this poor man's life. He is alone. He is ostracized. He's continually tormented. He's in anguish. He lives amongst the dead. And he's separated from everything that is potentially good in life. But Jesus goes on to say this. He says, but I have come that you might have life, and life in all of its fullness. And of course, that life is about to burst into being for this man. It's interesting that Jesus set off across the lake because as he went across the lake, he was heading into what was Gentile territory. Jesus had primarily come to minister to the Jewish people. And yet it's as if he can't help himself every now and again just stray into Gentile territory. I wonder if it's why the storm came up on the lake that we heard about last week, because something was in opposition to what Jesus wanted to do. I wonder if Jesus crossed the lake simply for this one man, because he'd come to bring life, and life in all of its fullness. There's then this strange dialogue between Jesus and the man and the impure spirit. It says, when he saw Jesus from a distance, meaning the man, when the man saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. I think it's interesting that this guy is somehow drawn to Jesus. He sees Jesus from a distance. He could easily have gone the other way, but there's something in the moment that this guy just is drawn towards Jesus. He actually throws himself down in front of Jesus in what is in effect like an act of surrender and worship. And at the same time, there's this sort of power struggle that suddenly goes on. The demons seem to speak through the man. "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God?" We're told that in those days that there was a belief that if you knew somebody's name, if you knew their full name and you knew their title, that in some way you were able to gain spiritual authority over that person. It's interesting that as the man speaks, it wasn't him speaking. He couldn't have known that. It's as if the spirit is speaking, the impure spirit is speaking through him. But he refers to Jesus in an interesting way. Jesus, his earthly name. And then he says, Son of the Most High God. Not just Jesus the Christ or the Messiah, not just a messianic title, but a divine title. He knows who Jesus is, the Son of the Most High God. But of course, there is no authority to be gained over Jesus because all authority resides in him. And so then it's as if the impure spirit begins to try to barter with Jesus. Jesus has said to him, "Come out of this man." And the spirit seems to try to negotiate a bit of a win-win. But again, Jesus has all authority. And we see just in this moment, just this wonderful authority and love and compassion that Jesus has for him. That just in a few words, he casts out this impure spirit from this man. He says, "What is your name?" And the impure spirit says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And you can imagine, as a consequence of just that, you can imagine the state that poor man was in. And yet Jesus just has all authority, even over a legion of demons. And he sets the man free. Then we have this, we'll come back to that in a minute. But then we have this strange moment with the pigs. Like I remember when I was at Sunday school, I used to hear this story and I used to think, man, those poor pigs. Like, why did that happen to the pigs? I used to feel this doesn't sit well with me. And then, of course, I'd go home and have roast pork or, I don't know what, but you know what I mean? It was like, this doesn't feel right. This is one of those areas, isn't it, where it's like there were so many different ideas. There's a guy, I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book about the kingdom of God, and in it he talked about 7 theories as to why Jesus sent the demons into the pigs. I'm sure they're all good. But I guess the truth is we don't really know. We don't really know. There's a lot of ideas out there, but we don't really know. But I guess it just highlights to me again the authority and the lordship of Jesus. But it also, in a way, highlights again the firm intention of the enemy to kill and to steal and to destroy. That as soon as the demons enter into the pigs, they rush down the hill and they drown themselves. And it's like what was happening to this poor man is seen in what happens to the herd of pigs. The firm intention of the enemy to steal and to kill and to destroy. Well, the story goes on. It says those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind. What a beautiful, understated picture of complete and utter transformation. Remember the earlier verses? This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. And then he meets Jesus, who has all authority. And in just a few words, it then says this: they saw the man who'd been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed. I imagine that was a relief. And in his right mind. It's the transformation that Jesus brings. And I guess this morning, as we read this story, I just want to say that this isn't just an isolated incident. It isn't just something that happened 2,000 years ago. Actually, that's Jesus' heart for every single one of us. That he wants to bring life in all of its fullness, in every area of our lives. And it might be today that you feel like there's things that you struggle with. I guess that's the case for all of us. I guess I just want to encourage you again this morning just to bring them before Jesus, to lay them at his feet. Sometimes those things can take a while. Sometimes it's a process. Sometimes it has to involve others. But I want you to know that it's Jesus' overwhelming desire to bring life in all of its fullness to you and to those that you love. The reaction of those that saw it is fascinating. It says, when they came to Jesus, they saw the man who'd been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there dressed and in his right mind. And then it says, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. What an interesting response. don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, Emma talked about the parable of the sower. This is the parable of the sower. Because Jesus in that parable said this, that he said that God sows the seed of his word liberally and generously. But some of that seed falls upon soil where the soil is so hard, it's just snatched away. And it's interesting, isn't it, that here in this story, these people see the transformation that Jesus brings to this man. And yet they, rather than responding with faith, they respond with fear. And they ask Jesus to leave the region. And I guess that can often be our experience, can't it? Sometimes we find that people can experience something of the presence and the work of God in their lives, and yet, rather than responding with faith to it, they respond with fear, or maybe sometimes just with apathy, and in essence ask Jesus to leave the region. I was so encouraged earlier this week. I was told by somebody this week that another person at the larder on Tuesday that had prayed for more people that Tuesday than any other Tuesday at the larder this week. And I just thought that's so awesome. I love that. And we want to be a people, don't we? We want to pray for people. We want to minister something of the love of God, the hope of God, the peace of God, the provision of God, the healing of God, the life of God. We want to be people that do that as often as we can in people's lives. And it's so encouraging to hear those stories. But it also struck me that we want to be a people that pray for soft hearts in our community. That there might be people who have soft hearts towards the things of God. Because it's easy sometimes for people even to experience the work of God in their lives or in the life of someone close to them, and yet respond with fear rather than faith. And so as well as praying, offering to pray for those things, let's just make it our private prayer to say, Lord, would you give them soft hearts to you? The soil might be good for the seed of your word. Final thing. I love the way this ends. It says, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And all the people were amazed. I love that. Jesus, he doesn't just heal him. He doesn't just restore him. It's like he gives him a reason to live. He gives him something to live for. He calls him and he sends him. And, the guy, he's desperate to get in the boat. He sees Jesus and his disciples about to get back in the boat. And he's like, oh, let me come with you. And Jesus says, no, that's not your thing. But this is your thing. I'm sending you back to the people from where you once came from. The Decapolis, it was the 10 cities, a different geographical region of Israel. He says, go there. Go and tell them what God has done for you. And I love the response of the people in the Decapolis. All the people were amazed. It's a pretty different response to the response of those who had witnessed it in their area just a few moments ago. But it's just a reminder, I think, that every single one of us is called to be an ambassador for Jesus. I feel like I say this quite a lot, but it's so important that we know that. It's so important that we understand that the call of Jesus does not necessarily always end up with a dog collar. The call of Jesus does not always end up working for a Christian charity. The call of Jesus does not always end up meaning that you go abroad. Some people do, but all of us are called. Every single one of us is called. and sent by Jesus to be his ambassador in the place where you are. It might be the world of global finance. It might be the world of architecture or law. It might be the world of education or healthcare. It might be the creative arts. In other words, it could be anywhere. All of us are called to be Christ's ambassadors, to go into those places and say, this is what the Lord has done for me. Don't ever think that because you don't have a dog collar, or because you don't work for a Christian charity, or because you don't go overseas to some unheard of place, that you're not called. It's just that that's a type of call, and Jesus calls all of us to be his ambassadors. And this guy is called. It's like he becomes one of the first apostles with a small a. One of the first sent ones. I always think the other first sent one was probably the woman at the well in John 4. What unlikely candidates at the beginning of the story, that they would be the sent ones, and yet they are. And Jesus sends them, and their communities hear about the love of God and the transformation that he brings. So friends, never forget, you're called and you're sent.